Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. So, here we have another passage, and on the basis of the given passage, we have some questions given here. So, let's look at the directions. So, the directions for question is answer the following questions based on the information given below. Okay. So, let's read the text and try to understand what this text is all about. The text begins with what? Possessing just cause is the first and arguable the most important condition of just art bellum. The just art bellum convention, also known as the law on the use of force, is a set of principles that limit the use of force between states. Most theorists hold that initiating acts of aggression is unjust and gives a group a just cause to defend itself, but unless aggression is defined, this prescription is rather open ended. For example, just cause resulting from an act of aggression can ostensibly be a response to a physical injury. For example, you can say that. A violation of territory, an insult, an aggression against a national honor, a trade embargo, an aggression against economic activity, or even to a neighbor's prosperity, a violation of social justice. The onus is then on the just war theorist to provide a consistent and sound account of what is meant by just cause. While it's not going into the regions why the other explanations do not offer a useful condition of just cause, the consensus is that an initiating of physical force is wrong and may justly be resisted. Self defense against physical aggression, therefore, is putatively the only sufficient reason for just cause. Nonetheless, the principle of self defense can be extrapolated to anticipate probable acts of aggression, as well as in assisting others against an oppressive government or from another external threat, interventionism. Therefore, therefore, it is commonly held that aggressive war is only permissible if its purpose is to retaliate against a wrong already committed, for example, to pursue and punish an aggressor or to preempt an anticipated attack. In recent years, the argument for preemption has gained supporters in the West. Surely the argument goes it is right on consequentialist grounds to strike the first blow if a future war is to be avoided. By acting decisively against a probable aggressor, a powerful message is sent that a nation will defend itself with armed force. Therefore, preemption may provide a deterrent and a more peaceful world. However, critics complain that preemptive strikes are based on conjecture rather than impending aggression and in effect denounce the moral principle that an agent is presumed innocent. Posturing and the building up of armament do not in themselves constitute aggression. Just a man carrying a weapon is not a man using a weapon. Consequentialist critics may also reject preemption on the grounds that it is more likely to destabilize peace, while other realists may complain that a preemptive strike policy is the ploy of a tyrannical or bullying power that justifies other nations to act in their self-interest to neutralize either through alliances or military action, such is the principle behind the balance of power politics, in which nations constantly renew their alliances and treaties to ensure that not one of them becomes a hegemonic power. It is also feared that the policy of preemption slips easily into the machinations of false flag operations, in which a pretext of war is created by a contrived theatrical or actual stunt of dressing one's own soldiers up in the enemy's uniforms, for instance, and having them attack a military or even civilian target to gain political backing for a war. Unfortunately, false flag operations tend to be quite common. Just war theory would reject them as it would reject waging war to defend a leader's honor following an insult. Realists may defend them on grounds of a higher necessity, but such moves are likely to fail as being smoke screens for political rather than moral interest, isn't it? So, yeah. So if I talk about this particular text, the text, that's what actually it provided a discussion on the, you can say that principles and debates principles and debates surrounding what? Just art bellum, just as bellum. So um, you can also say that the set of principles governing the justification for engaging in war. So if you see that, uh, this is what you can find out. The principles and debates surrounding just art bellum, this, and stating about the principles governing the justification for engaging in a war. Now, okay, so if we look into the first couple of lines, so what do we understand? Uh, it introduction to Jus Art Bellum, where it is stated that uh, the law on the use of force, right? So Jus Art Bellum means what? That's something called as a law on the use of the force. Law on the use of force, isn't it? Law on the use of force, isn't it? So it outlines that possessing a just cause is the most crucial condition for going to war under this principle. So the paragraph suggests that most theorists agree that initiating acts of aggression is, you can say that, unjust, unjust, and unjust causes for defense. But it also points out the, you can say, ambiguity in defining what constitutes aggression. So uh, that is what the first part of the couple of lines which indicated. Similar to that, it also stated about definition of just cause and physical aggression, where it also stated about what? Mm, it is stated that that um, different possible interpretation of aggression, right? So an act of aggression and an act, you can say that just cause resulting from an act of aggression can ostensibly be a response to a physical injury. So violation of territory, right? An aggression against national honor, an aggression against economic activity. So you can say that physical violation, insult, trade, embargo, or economic inequality. So it then states that most theorists agree that only the initiation of physical force constitute a just cause for war, right? So similar to that, it also provides extrapolation of self-defense and preempt, right? So self-defense and preempt. So it is stated that or it discusses how the principles of self-defense can be extended to justify preemptive strikes, um, right? So, or interventionism to protect others from of oppressive regimes or external war or external threat. It notes that a preemptive war is considered acceptable if retaliates against a past wrong or stops a probable future attacks. Similar to that, if you talk about more about it, we also find out the author arguments for preemption, where the author stated that what in favor of preemptive strikes, isn't it? Where he pointed about proponents argue that on consequentialist grounds, striking first can stop a larger conflict and serve as a deterrent to future aggression. Right or not? Yeah. Okay, then we'll also meet means a criticism of preemption, right? Where the author stated about um, that critics argue that preemptive strikes are based on speculation rather than clear evidence of imminent aggression, thereby violating the moral presumption of innocence. They also contend that such actions can, you can say that, destabilize, right? So peace and encourage other nations to assimilate, leading to an unstable balance of power, right? So, and finally, we come to the last one where we talk about false flag operations and realist defense, right or not? So, false flag operation and realist defense. So we can say that these two lines of the last paragraph address the dangers of preemption, right? Preemption slipping into false flag operation, where a nation, you can say, fabricates an attack to justify war, while such tactics are common. Just war theory condemns them, though you can say that realist um, may defend them as necessary for political objectives, isn't it? Or political interest, you can say, rather than moral interest. Okay, so you can say that the main argument of the last two lines indicate about what weakening that what false flag operations undermine just war principles and often mask political agenda rather than moral impotence or moral imperatives, isn't it? So overall, if you talk about the tone and style of the passage, what do we find out? The tone of the passage is nothing but analytical, and even we can say about balanced and academic and academic. It presents multiple perspectives on the you can say principles of just war theory, particularly regarding the justification for the use of force, isn't it? So, uh, in that case, we can talk about the tone, analytical, balanced, and academic. If you talk about the style of the passage, so style is nothing but a expository, expository, and argumentative. You can say that argumentative or discursive, you can say, right? With a focus on exploring, you can say that different viewpoints, weighing the merits and drawbacks of each, and examining nothing but the moral and practical implications of the argument presented. Okay, so these are the things that you find out. So all total, if you talk about the main argument of the text or main idea of the main idea of the text is um, to explore nothing but mm, explore the principles of jus ad bellum, and the conditions under which war may be considered just. The text also delves or went to
Next provided is a discussion on the principles and debates surrounding jus ad bellum, the set of
just
principles governing the justification for it.
so so we can say that what the text delves are called as um, takes into the concept of just cause, primarily focusing on the justification of self-defense against aggression. And you also talk about content as debate around preemptive strikes and false flag operations, isn't it? So preemptive strikes as well as you can say that false flag operation, it ultimately highlights the complexities and moral dilemma involved in defining and applying these principles in international relations, isn't it? Now, let's move to the question. So, what does the question ask here? The question started here. What underlying assumption does the author make about preemptive strikes in international conflict? Isn't it? Let's move this. Yeah. So the question asks you what underlying assumption does the author make about preemptive strikes in international conflict. So this means the question, um, if we paraphrase, we can say that the question is asking about what? The question is asking about the author's underlying assumptions, right? Underlying assumptions regarding preemptive strikes, right, in international conflicts. So an underlying assumption means what? So what do you mean by an underlying assumption? So you can say that a belief or idea idea that the author has, but doesn't directly state. Doesn't directly state, isn't it? So that can be called as underlying assumption. So the question is looking for what the author implies about preemptive strike, military action taken before an enemy uh, attacks. Let's look at the choice. The first choice stated, they are generally justified if they prevent a larger conflict. Now, the choice suggests what? That preemptive strikes are acceptable, right? If they stop a bigger war from happening, isn't it? They're generally justified. They are generally means preemptive strikes are generally justified that if that stop a larger conflict, right? That is what it is pointed. Now, uh, preemptive strikes are generally justified if they prevent a larger conflict. Um, in that case, if we see um, option one, option one is the argument in favor of what? That called as a preemptive strikes, right? But they do not reflect the author's critical perspective, isn't it? Critical perspective, right? So similar to that, if I look at the option two, they are based on certain threats and can lead to a greater instability. Now, when I talk about option two, this choice suggests that what preemptive strikes are often based on what? Often based on guesses, guesses, or you can say that predictions, guesses or predictions about what? About threats, which can make the situation more unstable or dangerous. Now, if I talk about underlying assumption, so weakening to the region, does the author make about preemptive strike in international conflict? So we can say option two sounds correct, or you can say that this choice is appropriate because uh, preemptive strikes are nothing but what? Preemptive strikes in international conflict are often based on guesses or prediction about the threats, which can make a situation more unstable or dangerous. So hence we can say two could be a correct one, but one is not, right? One is supporting. Three is saying they are an effective deterrent against probable aggression. Now, this choice suggests that preemptive strikes are a good way to discourage or prevent likely attacks from an enemy, right? Now, again, it supports the preemptive strikes. Then option four, they are morally acceptable under just war theory. So this choice suggests that preemptive strikes are considered okay or right according to the rules of just war theory, the ethical guidelines for war. So in that case, uh, if we observe option 1, 3, and 4, so we can find out, or 1 and 3, we can find out in favor of preemptive strike, but do not reflect the author's critical perspective. Option 4 is incorrect because the author suggests what? Um, that a preemptive strikes might contradict just war theory, not align with it, isn't it? So 1, 3, 4 are eliminated. But if you look at the passes. So we can say the author discusses preemptive strikes in a what? In a critical way, suggesting they are often based on guesses about potential threats rather than clear immediate danger. The author mentioned that preemptive strikes might not help keep pace and could actually make the situation worse or more unstable, isn't it? Yeah. Uh, then also you can find out mm, the the idea of option two is correct because it matches the author's view that a preemptive strikes are risky and may lead to more problems rather than solving it. Whereas option one, three, and four are supporting to preemptive strikes, and you can find out that giving a misleading information which had not been discussed in the passage. Hence, we can consider option two would be a correct answer. Hope you understood this. That's all. Thank